Also very nice. Okay, so what is fueling the growth in the economy? There is a lot of money in circulation. As we heard mentioned before, the tourism industry is one that is really fueling a lot of interest and a lot of income in Jamaica. Jamaica is one of the top 3 destinations to visit in the Caribbean. There are 12,000 hotel rooms that are going to be built between now and the next 3 years. This creates an opportunity for housing for staffing. I think a lot of times we need to focus on what's happening in the area. So if a hotel is going up in Lucy, where are all these people going to live? So maybe there's an opportunity there for housing that's going to facilitate residence for people that work in these industries. Infrastructure support for these developments is something I think that is greatly lacking. There's opportunities for restaurants, for supermarkets, for boutiques, for hairdressers. I mean, the list goes on and on. A lot of areas that you look at, like even between Montego Bay and Negril, there's so much opportunity. There's so many places being built. There's new developments in Lucy, in Trelawney, that need infrastructure. So that's just an example of one of the hotels that has been built. So we have a lot of investors, foreign investors coming in from Spain, from Canada, looking at building these resorts. So what has happened this year in terms of why is there more money in circulation? There's been a reduction in stamp duty, which was 4%. That 4% was divided between the purchaser and the seller. There is a flat fee now for stamp duty, which is 2,500 Jamaican dollars. The reduction in transfer tax, which was 5%, which is now 2%. The reduction in mortgage interest rates, thanks to JN and many of the other institutions, where you can get a mortgage now for as low as 7.99%. The cost of purchase has been greatly reduced. So you're looking at 2% in terms of government fees compared to 9% in government fees. The cost, NHT ceilings have been increased and interest rates have been reduced. NHT has lowered its interest rates and increased its ceiling. Just to give you an example, it has moved from 5.5 million to 6.5 million effective on May 1st. This represents an 18% increase in the loan ceiling, in keeping with these changes in construction costs. So the government bodies and the mortgage institutions realize that things don't remain the same, costs do go up. So the last increase we had from 5.5 was in 2016. NHT has reduced its interest rates by 1% for all mortgages effective May 1. So that gives people more money in their pockets. So again, where are the opportunities? The trickle-down effect from the construction industry is limitless. You look at, there's jobs, it creates more jobs for construction workers, tradesmen, plumbers, electricians, construction companies, architects, valuers, surveyors, attorneys, designers, manufacturers, realtors, furniture manufacturers, furniture sales, appliance sales. So if you think about areas where these middle to low income houses are being developed, so you're looking at maybe 2,000 houses being built, maybe 6,000 people. All these houses need furniture, all these houses need appliances. Where do they have to come to? They have to come to places like Montego Bay, maybe Ocho Rios and Kingston. So look at the whole of the North Coast and the development that's taking place, and look at those opportunities. Where are the opportunities besides construction of low to middle income houses? Let us look at the private sector. There's commercial activities to support these communities, which I just mentioned. Restaurants, shops, medical, entertainment, warehousing. I mean, restaurants, for example, Jamaica has become a real foodie restaurant culture. The other day I went online to order. They have these services now that you can call in, and they have a list of all the restaurants that you can order from. And I was amazed at the amount of restaurants that there are in Kingston and even in Montego Bay. I remember coming to Montego Bay years ago and I had a choice of maybe one or two places. Now there's a tremendous amount of restaurants. So again, that's another big opportunity. In the growth, I think the public sector has a big responsibility. In these communities, you need to look at schools, not just not just primary schools, but you need to look at tertiary education. A more educated population is going to lead to people being able to get more jobs, earn an income, and then to be able to buy a home. Public transportation, a huge one. And I think that public transportation can be looked at not just for public sector, but also for private sector. You look at things like Uber in the States, not in the States, worldwide. You know, parking is a big issue. In Kingston now, a lot of the restaurants are talking about providing car services through existing car companies to get people to their restaurants because they come and there's no place to park. Infrastructure improvement needs to be looked at by the government. We need to continue to look at roads. We need to continue to look at hospitals, medical centers, and of course, as I mentioned, transportation being a big one. So where I see a lot of opportunity is, let us look at the corridor between Montego Bay, going right through to Negril. You know, anything, there's so much vacant land there. You know, look at it, even if you don't have any plans for the land right now, try and buy some land. So these are some of the areas. The medical center, which you see Montego Bay has done, transportation, and of course entertainment, being a big thing. People need to go to movies. They want to go to parks for their children. So there's a lot that can be done there. So I had a little conversation outside with someone who said, you know, Jamaica is not really promoting itself. Yes, we can promote ourselves a lot more, but I think this year alone we've had a tremendous amount of kudos and support from the international communities. Jamaica has been upgraded by Standard & Poor's to be a B+ with a stable outlook. I venture to say that we probably have one of the highest ratings in the Caribbean, or maybe the highest rating in the Caribbean. Moody's credit rating for Jamaica was last set at a B3 with a positive outlook. And as I said, again, I think we're being rated as one of the highest. Jamaica's stock market. You know, this is also a way that wealth has been created in this country. According to Bloomberg, Jamaica's stock market leads the world in terms of growth. The JSE increased 30.06% since the beginning of 2019. Historically, the Jamaican stock market reached an all-time high of 528,380 in August 2019, with its low in 1988 of 1,295. What a tremendous increase. Again, it's something we need to be proud of. Again, it's something that is an opportunity. You know, this is not just for the rich people. People can buy into it and really increase their wealth. The International Monetary Fund. I don't know how many of you saw Christine Lagarde's presentation that she gave specifically on Jamaica. And her words are, Jamaica is a model example of success. It has created jobs, reduced employment to the lowest levels ever in Jamaica, and it has reduced its debt to 50% of GDP. So what that means is that our country is getting richer. So housing becomes more affordable. I wanted to just touch on something which I think I may have missed. Let's see. I don't want to get to that one. Maybe it's not on the slide, but I just wanted to talk to you. Okay, I'm not sure why the slide isn't there. But one of the things too, that I just wanted to give you an example of what the reduction in interest rates means. When I bought my first home 28 years ago, my interest rate was 25%. So let us do an example. On $14 million, your monthly payment is $289,345 a month. The interest I would have paid on that loan over 28 years was $72 million to borrow $14 million. And I'm getting this from Jane's mortgage calculator. Today, okay, if you were to borrow $14 million at 7.99%, your payments are $106,881. And the total interest over 25 years is $18,064,000. So what that is saying is that there is so much more money out there available. Even, yes, we talk about affordable housing, prices do have to go up, but the opportunities are there for people to be able to borrow money. One of the things too is that the banks are very, very willing. There was a time when you couldn't get a loan for commercial real estate. Now you're finding that banks are competing. I think banks are competing with NHT, and we've never ever seen that. So a sustainable economy is created by opportunities, which leads to growth, which leads to prosperity. There's a lot of opportunities in the real estate sector, and there is money available for financing it at much reduced rates. So I'm really excited. Yes, the Jamaican market is booming. Yes, we still have a shortage of 15,000 homes per year, but that is an opportunity. So speak to your clients, developers in the room, investors in the room. These are something that one needs to seriously look at. I'm very I believe it's just beginning. Thank you all very much, and I hope you learned something today.
Jamaica is in a good place from an economic perspective. There are some people who will say they're not feeling this. But the truth is, where we are now, it sets us up nicely for where we want to be in the future. I can speak basically from where we are on this side of the island. I'm not sure about those who are in Kingston. But we have a mayor who likes to say that Montego Bay is the fastest growing city anywhere in the English-speaking Caribbean. And if you look around Montego Bay, it will be hard for you not to agree with him. What that means is that the opportunities are here not just for low to middle income housing, but of course, Deborah touched on it. Several other areas of the ecosystem can be met through what is going on in the economy. One of the things that I'm beginning to wonder about, Deborah and those others, the developers and so on who are in the room, is whether or not we're now not supposed to start and having a conversation about sustainability of our housing developments. Shouldn't we be making it mandatory, for example, that we have rain harvesting systems set up in all of these housing solutions, or some kind of alternative energy source in these housing developments? Because what we're looking at with what's going on with climate change and all of these things is that the communities are themselves crying out for these resources, whilst I believe that at the outset, we could be putting those resources in as we build out these housing solutions. So ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank Deborah. Could you put your hands together again for her, for laying the foundation for us? And having said that, The demand is really out there for low to middle income housing. But the question is really the demand in that space? Is the demand in the space for low to middle, or is it in the space for higher end housing? And of course, we have the president of the Realtors Association of Jamaica here with us, Mr. Andrew James. And he's going to come and qualify this demand that we've been talking about. Where is the demand? Is the demand real? Are we just talking about things that are really not happening? And Andrew is positioned to tell us this. Let us put our hands together as we welcome Andrew to share with us his perspective.
About 2 years ago, a couple called me that they're interested in renting a property. Took them to the property, and the gentleman, he was in his 60s, the lady close to 60. Long and short of it is that based on the gentleman was actually collecting a pension, and the wife, she was doing contract work from time to time. Of course, a landlord would be very hesitant to rent someone like this, or to rent this couple. And the question you would ask, what they did with their life. I mean, all these years they didn't buy anything, didn't own anything, and now they're still renting. So I spoke to the gentleman. I said, what happened? He said, each time they found a property, his wife wanted a perfect property. And they keep putting it off. And I said, it is sad that now they basically have nowhere to live. The truth is, it can happen to anyone inside here, unless you plan. And the problem is that, as a young person, leaving college, whatever it is, sometimes instead of deciding that, guess what, I'm going to start with a one-bedroom, then maybe add another bedroom, we want our first house to be our dream house. And so we keep on procrastinating and so on. And I'm here today to share with you that now is the time. I want to speak to persons today who don't own a home, who still looking for that dream home or dream house. There are persons who here who basically they'd rather live in an apartment and pay $100,000 for rent and not willing to say start somewhere and pay a mortgage of $120,000. Good morning, my name is Andrew James. I want to share with you two things I want to share today. One, I want to speak to persons who have not acquired a home as yet. And two, I want to also speak to realtors in terms of what is happening in the industry, and everyone, what is happening in our industry. The time is now. So, for the person who think owning a home is a task, I'm here to share with you today that no, it's not. One, I recommend that you get pre-approved. And I see Jay and Representative around who can get you pre-approved if you're not. Two, speak to a realtor. Not just a real estate agent, a realtor who will guide you through the process. Okay? when I said now is the time, Debbie spoke earlier and she's mentioned lower interest rates, reduced transaction costs. Never before. There are institutions offering 110%. There's no excuse. The excuse most people had over the years is that I don't have the deposit, or I'm going to save the deposit. And by the time you save the deposit, you end up going to pay another bill. And so you end up not owning a property. I'm here today to say to you, the time is now, the opportunities are there, grab it. A lot of persons here would say, I should have bought a property, say for example, Long Mountain. You remember when Long Mountain came out, anybody here? They were selling for like 4.5. You remember that those days? And you said, boy, you find all the excuses. Those who did not buy into Long Mountain, now to see what they're selling for now, you regret it, don't you? Right. So the truth is, usually in life, you regret the things that you didn't do, not the things that you did. The things that you didn't do. Boy, if I didn't know, I would have. I should have. Right? So this is to encourage you. Do not procrastinate. The time is now. Two other points I want to talk about quickly before I move on. When you're purchasing a property, it's important, even if you're buying cash or you're taking a mortgage, two things. A valuation report, very important. You don't want to pay too much for that property, and when you're ready to sell that property, you realize that, boy, you're not paying too much. Okay? The valuation report is very important. Two is your surveyor's report. Now, your surveyor's report is very, very, very important. And of course, if you're taking a loan, the banks will not move forward unless you get a surveyor's report. Because two things is very important. Something called a breach and encroachment. Now, the breach is when a building structure deviates from what is on the restrictive covenant. That's the breach. And the encroachment is when the established boundary goes over the actual registered boundary, right? So those things are important when you're purchasing a property. You don't want, when you're ready to sell, you found out that the property that you think you own is not that one. Even with apartments. I know someone was selling an apartment, and when the person who was buying did the survey, he found out the property that he owns is across the corridor. So he was living in the wrong apartment all this time. Okay? So these are some of the things that you need to do. Do not be penny wise and pound foolish. Just want to share that. So now we're finished with the new homeowners. Now you're ready, and I know that, guess what? If I don't buy now, it's going to cost me 10 times more later on. Do not procrastinate. I want to share with you what is happening in our economy quickly. And I'll say, especially to the realtors here, let me mention it, land. Land. And she said it, but she never said it this way, land stop make. Right? So therefore, land. And I say to our realtors, go out and get as much land there is. There's a great demand for commercial properties right now. And there are developers who are willing to build. The BPO sector is doing well. There's need for warehousing. There's need for office space. There's so much need for commercial properties right now, it's unbelievable. So I encourage realtors here today, go out. Encourage people to sell. Encourage people to buy. Okay? There's a great demand for commercial property, commercial real estate. Needless to say, residential. And I find that most developers seem to focus on the high end. And there's a great need between, I'll say, 10 to 16 million. There's a great need for these properties, but our developers are not looking that side. I don't know. The president is here, and maybe he'll share with you why is it that the profit margin is too small. But I think other developers have proven that as was expressed earlier, with what happened in terms of the great demand for these properties. With so many hotels being built along this corridor, hotel workers need to live somewhere. So if it means that maybe we need to now start looking at not just focusing Montego Bay, but straight along the stretch. There are hotels going up, not just hotels, but different commercial activities going on, and they need workers, okay? So it's important that realtors focus in these areas. I want to also mention there's a great need now for solar farms. I don't know if you're aware of it. Solar farms. So the marginal lands can be used for this, something to bear in mind. There's so much work out there. The time is ripe. I'm really passionate about this because what is happening in Jamaica right now, take advantage of it. If you don't, the foreigners will. I can tell you one thing, the number of foreign realtors who are interested in coming to Jamaica to practice is unbelievable. They are sending their application to real estate board, they want to come here to work. Right? So it shows that they're seeing something that we here not understanding. Jamaica is a place to invest. I must say, some time ago, something was said by a former minister. The road to development is the development of roads. Anybody remember that? All right. Now, with all the road works taking place, it's opening up. It's opening up the entire, so Jamaica is no longer taking you 3.5 hours from Kingston to come to Montego Bay. I got here in less than 2 hours, and I wasn't speeding. But we have good roads. Good roads. Did you hear somebody say something? That's between us. We should not repeat it, okay? Now, if you look at what is going to happen to St. Thomas, and these are areas that you need to watch what is happening in the economy. As soon as that road is completed, Factories Corporation finished the commercial activity by Morant Bay, you realize it's important now because that you start buying property in that side of the island, because it's going to open up a new thing, right? If you look at what is going to happen along the corridor between Clarendon, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, with a special economic zone, you need to read some more on what is going to happen there, because there are big plans there. It's good to invest now. You reap the benefit after, I guarantee you. Last, but by no means least, we have been talking, I saw an article recently that there is an oversupply of apartment units. I'm not of that opinion, because you realize that most of these apartment complexes being built, when you call, you hear sold out before the first block is laid, right? So there's still room for developers to make some good money. Am I right, sir? There's still, the cake is big enough, so everybody can still get a slice of it, right? So in closing, I just want to say to you that the time to invest in Jamaica is now. Not tomorrow, not next year, not 5 years from now. It's now. You'll reap the benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So if you did not get the message, let me repeat it. The time to invest is when? No. Y'all know that old African proverb that the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago, and the very next best time is when? Now. All right, so if you missed the boat 20 years ago, yes, at the Long Mountain experience, your next best time is right now. We don't want to have you back in this room 20 years from now. And you see me with a smile on my face, right? 20 years from now, coming to tell us if I didn't know, right? We don't want to do that. So if you see an opportunity, we're encouraging you to make the best use of that opportunity. I'm not sure if Mr. Lenworth Kelly is in the room. He's here, right? Great. I'm happy to have you, sir. And of course, so the realtors, they qualified the demand. They told us, yes, the demand is real, and now is a really good time to invest. Mr. Lenworth Kelly is going to tell us about the cost. Why is it so expensive to build houses? In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier, and one of the points that they made was that part of the reason why people are not getting into housing development is that the returns on the investment is not attractive enough. I don't know if Mr. Kelly is going to debunk that, but we're going to invite him to come to quantify the demand. He is the president of the Incorporated Master Builders Association of Jamaica, so he should know something about the cost. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together as we welcome Mr. Kelly.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I can't help but feeling I've been set up. I think Mike would know a lot more about the costs than I would. I have an appreciation of some components, which I will here share. As to why the cost of building is so expensive, there's a bunch of variables that go into that. But if a lady wants a Louis Vuitton bag, that's what she wants. I'll just leave it right there. Now, we look at the construction in its components. So if you're looking to develop, we have to break construction into its components. So the house is one component of the overall construction cost. I won't get into a lot of the pre-construction activities. I suspect the developers may speak more to that. So you have the house, but there's a lot of support that has to go in for that house, which is the infrastructure, we call it. And so often you see people blocking roads, demonstrating, you flush the toilet, and everything comes back up at you. The roads are potholed, or the roads are not paved, they cannot get any water, there's no electricity, that kind of thing. So that's the infrastructure side. So I'll just kind of look into the elements of infrastructure and what helps to drive the cost up. The minimum is the minimum. So the whole idea is you try and keep as close to the minimum that you can. Now, regardless of the type of house you're going to put on a fixed size lot, let us say it's a 5,000 square foot lot. Maybe if you want to put a 3,000 square foot house on it, or you want to put a 200 square foot house on it, the infrastructure cost for that lot is still the same. It is still the same. And we are seeing infrastructure costs roughly for a 4,000 square foot lot, kind of in a band between $2.5 and $3.5 million. So that has to be put onto the land before you even start talking about the house. So if you're just going to sell the lot, and allow the guy to build his thing, you have that infrastructure cost that you have to put in. He has to get water. For these size lots, you want to ensure that there is a sewage treatment system there, sewage collector system, and it has to have power from JPS. All right? Now, This cost varies based on terrain. You may ask why. And remember, it's not necessarily a clean band. You can go more easily over the 3.5 than you go under the 2.5. What you'll find is most of our larger housing developments are on flat or what you call gently sloping land. If you look where you see a lot of houses, flat or gently sloping land. It's very expensive to build on steeper slopes and undulating terrain. Now, just we have a dilemma, however, in terms of the flat or gently sloping land, because those tend to be alluvial plains where the rich soil washes down and it's prime agricultural land. So I understand the dilemma that sometimes government faces in trying to provide housing at a certain cost, but also trying to ensure that we have land where we can actually put into agricultural use to feed ourselves. So we will always have that. We will always have, I think it was Fidel Castro who said that how can you build on the plains? People must build on the hillside. The food goes on the plains. But that is for those in policy to address in a more detailed way. Now, what you can find when you're up on the slopes, what you tend to have is, before I get into I have to kind of mix it for you so you can appreciate why your costs go up. You get the wash off. Those are usually where you have your rock formations. Now, if you have to excavate in soil, just regular soil on the plains, as opposed to have to excavate on the hillsides in rock, then obviously there's an increased cost because now you have to use demolition equipment and that kind of thing. The going is also slow. And what we have found is that if you have a rock component of, say, greater than 30%, you're going to start to look at an increase in your infrastructure costs upwards of 25%. Because that you have to remove that material to get your infrastructure in. There's no getting away from it. With designs, with more detailed designs, with more care in designing, you can actually mitigate some of that by using some elements which your engineers can speak to. So what you do, if you have to go on a slope, you design for best use of the slope. But it will always be significantly more expensive than on the gentler slopes and on what you call relatively flat terrain. Because it's easier to put in everything runs at shallower depths and so on. Now, if you have to put in what you call a sewage treatment system, unless there is central sewer for many of the systems now going in where the NWC does have a collector system going by, then you can tie into that. But for most of our developments, you have to put in what you call an on-site sewage treatment plant, right? And that is also a part of your cost. You typically, it varies. The developer, as I said, Mike can speak more to this, can usually make a call. Let's push it over. Yeah, the developer has to make a call in terms of going with a bigger lot size and people do their own on the lot system, which reed beds or whatever. Or it goes with a smaller lot, put in a central sewage treatment plant. So he has to run his numbers to work out which one is best for him because he still has to make a profit. This part is for Mike. Mike, I didn't know you were going to be here. I would only need 5 minutes. Continue with the variables. Water. don't know how many of you have had an experience where you're doing a development, but NWC tells you that they can't give you the water. As a matter of fact, if you read the literature correctly, they never promise you water. Nowhere in their literature says that they will give you water. They will say that the system that you have in place is appropriate for receiving water, but they can't promise you water because they don't make water. And I heard the president during the drought trying to subtly remind citizens that NWC doesn't make water. They can only harness what is there and send it to you. If there's none there, then there's none to be had. So keep in mind that your rainwater, you want to ensure that you have some rainwater harvesting. But what will happen is a case in point, we're doing a development and there was supposed to have been a 4-inch main coming through there, but it didn't. As in Jamaica oftentimes, I don't know what went wrong, but there's a 1-inch pipe serving several households. And when we approached the NWC, they told us that we would have to pay the cost of bringing the line up. We don't want to get into what the numbers are, so we just forget about the project. We can't handle that one. And whenever they decide to bring a line somewhere up there, then we can go back to it. So the truth is, you will need water, and if you went ahead down the road in your project without assessing the availability of that supply, you can be in serious trouble. Because you'll find nobody will buy a house for you if they can't get water. So, so if it's there already, then that's fine. They will charge you for their connections and you do your sterilization and your testing. They come in and witness that, and then that cost is obviously added. Now, in some instances where the supply may be regular and they don't have a tank, they may require you to put in what you call a redundant supply, which is maybe a tank in your development to hold water for, I think typically it's 3 days supply of water, the size water minimum. All right, so that's your water, and that tells you how your price of your water, as that aspect of your infrastructure, can go up or be at the minimum. Roads, the same applies. If you are on an even gentle slope, you pretty much, what you do, cut to formation level. So you take out what's there down to the level that you need to build up back with your marl, your asphalt, or your concrete, and your curbs, and so on. When you're in hilly terrain, what you have to do is cut and fill, because the place is going like this, but you can't have a road that go like this. Though we have some roads that go like this, but that's because of the potholes. What you find is that you will have to cut some areas to fill some areas and so on. So you can't get your road in like a gentle curve or a straight. And so that additional component and hilly terrain drives your road cost up. So you may now start getting an appreciation of what is involved. The terrain is critical, but we're not going to be able to have all the terrain that we see around us to build on. It's just not going to happen. So some of us will have to take smaller margins and go up on the slope. Power, this is a GPS cost, and they will usually give you 2 options. One, if you pay the lower figure, you don't get back the money. If you pay the higher figure, then they'll tell you as people come onto the system, then they refund you. Now, if you are certain, especially in this market, if you're certain of what you're putting out, the housing stock you're putting out, and you're certain of your sales, then you can pay the higher figure because you know you're going to get those people coming back on. JPS is a little tight-fisted. They are trying to improve, but they are still tight-fisted in giving you back money. They may have learned quite a bit from the government. What we have found now is houses. So let's have a look at the houses now. So your infrastructure, we said, roughly between 2.5 and 3.5 billion, and it can go skywards of 3.5 million. Just bear that in mind. That's per lot for average 4,000 square foot lot. Don't go out there and tell anybody that the president come and tell you, say that's what it costs. I give you the average size of the lot. Now for your house, now typically what we look at for the low to middle income housing is pretty much maybe studios, one bedrooms, anywhere from 450 maybe to 650 or so square feet. Now what we have found is, for most of you who know the business, we have a lot of contractors now use what you call form systems. So you put up all the forms with the steel work, the plumbing, everything in it, and a truck comes and just pour the concrete in it. So you don't see a lot of developments going up with blocks anymore. Individual homes, you see that, but a lot of larger developments that have quite a few units in them, poured walls, when they pull it off, you see nice, smooth walls. The walls aren't always nice and smooth, but that is the intent. Now, critical in this is the form system that you use and the payback for that form system. Many developers decide to purchase the form system and have the contractor use it to install, because the developer knows he's going to be in the business and he's going to be maybe doing 1,500 houses eventually. He might just be doing 100 now. It won't necessarily work out for the contractor to buy it if he's only going to do 100 houses now and not sure if he'll get any more. So that's a consideration if you're going into development. You can consider purchasing your own form system. Now, the payback for a lot of these systems, usually they'll tell you that it can give you maybe 1,000 uses. It's good for 1,500 uses or however. The payback varies depending on how you use it, the efficiency with which you use it, and how you maintain it. All right, so that is critical, because remember, the form really represents the finished. So it's important that when you're doing that thing, this is digressing a bit, but ensure that your form is good. If your form rough, then what you're doing is pouring a concrete wall and then have to perhaps come back and render the wall, which you'd have to do to a block wall anyway. You will be behind the 8 ball because you're going to end up more expensive than doing a block wall. So you want to just be mindful of that. So the idea with the kind behind getting a clean face, you can probably just do a little skin plaster on it as opposed to the rendering of both sides that traditionally we would do. And so you'd have a huge saving there. The other saving is in the speed at which you can turn over units. If you have 2 sets of farms, you're doing 2 houses per day, 2 full sets of farms. You pull, you go tomorrow. You just go for a high strength concrete that allows you to pull it the next day. So there are some little intricacies in there, and your professionals would guide you in that regard. You can, if you're just going with a regular, maybe 800,000 square foot house, it makes sense that you go with block work, because what you're going to do with the forms when you are finished with them, you would have basically had those sitting on you. Another thing with the former, because of the size of the investment you'd have to make in forms, it is important that when you're getting your form systems made, that you try and have a design, if you're doing a repetitive design, a design that uses as much as possible the standard sizes that the manufacturer has. Once you get into non-standard sizes, your former costs going through the roof. Your roof is pretty much standard for whatever structure. It's going to cost the same if you're going with shingles, it's shingles. If you're going with zinc, it's zinc. For the medium and low income, there is a, what you call it, decramastic type, which tends to be cheap and gives very good hurricane resistance. Your fixtures and fittings depend on, really are up to you, your toilets, your basins, and so on. Then you will also have your approval costs and your costs for your consultants for design and so on. That may be anywhere between 6 and 12%. So in closing, what we have found is that the band for building houses with these poured walls, which is pretty much the quickest way, we are seeing the prices ranging from $6,500 to $8,000 per square foot. And the movement has to do with the cost of your finishes, if you want to put in this price porcelain versus that price ceramic and that kind of thing. But in that band, where we have found pretty much our numbers are falling now. Now remember that as the dollar moves, things change, then you will get increases. So you have to take a snapshot at it, but maybe another 4 or 5 months to take another look at the numbers again, see if they are still holding or if they are inching up, or as the case may be. Now, I just want to make some final remarks on housing for this. I think someone had mentioned the micro, low, and medium markets. And micro, I think, is appropriate because a lot of my workers, well, obviously are construction workers, and they can't even start to harbor dreams of going to get any loans to purchase a house. So what we have done and what we know others in the industry have done is to, once you have an employee who comes and can show you that they own this piece of land, whether it's a piece of family land or something, you kind of try and give them a start. And with time, they get it done. Every payday, they buy some block, buy a little steel, you help them with some farm work, some cement and so on. And with time, if you watch him over years, give him a year, him have a 1 room, and him proud of it. Tile it out a door, but him proud of that 1 room. And then you come back in another 5 years, him have a bathroom with a kitchen on it. And then you come back, then, and a lot of these guys, what we have seen is now when they're coming closer to 50, 60, Andrew, they mind them third landlord. Place them rent out, and build them add on upstairs. All of them push through the steel, so you know them have a plan to go up. It's like a Jamaican thing. And we have found that method works. And I think sometimes we have to get creative with sectors. And one of the things, this is not an original thought, I did some reading subsequently and I found out. So unless housing is subsidized for the most vulnerable, many of those persons in this micro and low income earning bracket, the bottom of the scale, will never, ever get a house. Never own a home. Even if it is built and sold to them at cost. Never. It requires some intervention on the part of government. Call it part of a social program, whatever you want to do, but it needs intervention from government. And I'm not hearing that discussion. Now, one of the things that and I'm a layman at this, but I'm suggesting that this may be able to work. Let us say you come in and you want to develop for this particular sector, and you have run your numbers, you can bring the house to market for, let us say, $4 million. But that is still too high for them. One of the things government can do is do like a tax rebate. So for all the taxes associated with it, the rebate comes back to the developer, but you subtract that rebate from the cost to the purchaser. So we're going to have to get creative, but I sat here and I listened Miss Silvera talking about how many squatters we have. And in Mobile alone is 20,000. We can't find space for 20,000 houses in Mobile, but we have to start to find spaces for these people. All those hotels going up out by Coral Spring there and elsewhere, you're going to have squatter communities, because people are not going to travel from St. Thomas to go to work there. They're going to find somewhere in some bush, and after a couple of years you realize they have what you call a unplanned development. And that brings a myriad of issues. Because unplanned developments, when you try to put infrastructure in there, it's the most expensive infrastructure ever. Because you don't know working around who is there, as opposed to putting something in. Cut it up then and say, okay, allow these people to go here. Even if them going to go with shanty, but at least structure something. Put them shanty with time, them get to building a thing. But a lot of these areas, it can't go past shanty. And this is my final point. Don't underestimate what a house means to someone. It was a Saturday morning, another worker. I had to go into his neighborhood to check somebody. And I saw this man crying. He was stooping down and crying. Apparently, they had said they're squatting there, so them come and tear down the place. And he was weeping. He wasn't trying to fight anybody or anything. He wasn't threatening anybody to kill them. He was just weeping. And what had really happened? What had he built? There's a building built in a L already that other people occupied. And all he did was get 4 sheets of plywood and put this on it. And then get a room. Put on him zinc, and then do him like a thing for him floor. That was his castle. Never underestimate what a home means to these people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. I can sense the passion and the emotion as he spoke about the value of owning a home in Jamaica. And ladies and gentlemen, the cost is real, based on what Mr. Kelly described here this morning. The fact is that there are real costs that are associated with building houses in Jamaica. And some of those costs are unavoidable. And it will add to the delivery price at the end of the day. But maybe we can move the discussion and begin to talk about building technology that probably could make the cost of these houses a little less expensive than it currently is. Stuff like that. But we really want to thank Mr. Kelly for sharing with us this morning. And I'm going to invite you again to thank him for his presentation. And let me apologize to those people who are watching us on social media. They have been complaining that they have not been hearing us. It is too low. So I've moved the mic back into the center of the podium. So I'm going to remind the speakers coming up that you should speak directly into the mic so that they can hear and participate in this event. So we've heard from the Realtors Association of Jamaica. We've heard from, of course, the Incorporated Master Builders Association. So we want to hear from the developers. What is it that they have to say about delivering low to middle income housing solution in Jamaica? And so we're going to invite Mr. Michael Lake, who is the president of the Developers Association of Jamaica, to come and talk to us about the market experience. Could we put our hands together as we welcome Mr. Lake?
Morning, friends. Conrad, Master of Ceremonies, thanks very much for that introduction. Fellow guest speakers, Lentworth, I want to thank you for bringing us back to some level of reality. I was concerned that I was going to be the only person up here spreading some level of doom and gloom. But no, it's not really doom and gloom, but some of the realities is still a bit far from perfect. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to participate in this presentation and certainly giving our side of the story. I did invite a number of the players that are already building homes, particularly in your parish, but they were too busy building that they couldn't spend the time. So they've sent me as their messenger in this case. So I hope I do offer some level of appropriate response. So on behalf of the Jamaica Developers Association, we would certainly like to thank for the opportunity to participate, as I had indicated. The Jamaica Developers Association this year actually celebrates their 50th year of the association. So we actually are coming with a fair level of experience within the industry. We were formed in 1969 by obviously a number of developers who were then experiencing great difficulty with the approval process, the government approval process. And in our business, time is directly related to costs. So any delay has a serious implication to us all. But I'm sorry to say that still after 50 years, we are still fighting the fight of this approval process and trying to expedite it quickly. Developers are these consummate entrepreneurs. We would provide solutions to meet the demand, providing that in doing so, there can be achieved a commensurate return for investment. The development process requires deep pockets because the process is quite costly and lengthy. Two requirements that tends to weed out most of the competition. Our membership covers all forms of developments, projects in particular, low, middle, and upper income housing solutions. Today, I hope to offer our association perspective in the low and middle income solutions. The process obviously begins with the identification of an opportunity. Because land is a critical element in this process, the opportunity to acquire land competitively is critical to the success of the low-income development. So obviously I was very concerned when Deborah and Andrew was encouraging everybody to go out and buy land. I kept seeing the costs going up, and therefore that was not in my favor. And I just would like to say to them that I now see the Chinese building islands in the Southeast Sea. I see in Dubai they're building islands also. They are creating new lands. So I wouldn't be repeating that there is no more land, you know. So think beyond the shores. Okay. So having acquired the land and concluding, you know, the necessary market survey, the planning process can now begin. Factors that affect the process are zoning, regulations, the existing covenants, and accessible infrastructure. Lenford spoke specifically about infrastructure, which is critical. And the reality is that the developer is really burdened with carrying the role of providing infrastructure to much of these developments, which in reality may not be the best solution for society. We have the NWC, we have JPS. These are professionals in that industry. And really, while we accept that there is a cost, it might be better for us to be viewed tapping into a system that they implement, and they can, of course, reap their returns in the long run by obviously on selling to the customer that will be following. So a public sewer line can significantly increase the allowable density on the plot of land. improving the likelihood of success, but unfortunately, in most cases, competitively priced plots of land, which are those that are way off the grid, are not where the public sewer systems exist. The absence of infrastructure now becomes the responsibility of the developer, as I said, which is could be viewed as the second hurdle. You know, the first hurdle being finding land that you can actually afford, because the truth is, once the land value exceeds maybe 20% of your project value, then you are now in trouble, because the lower income market is very much tapped by the customer's ability to access their funding. We all know most of that funding is coming from NHT, so if NHT determines that they can only earn in a certain range, then the developer can only build in that range. So kind of understand that there's now a finite price already determined by the financial institution that the developer now must go through all these various hoops and hurdles to be able to deliver, with the hope at the end of the day coming out with a profit. So going back to script, the removal of restrictive covenants, for example, is a very common thing. And this is a legal process that unfortunately takes several months. I mentioned that because, again, I said to you that time is money. And you have already invested in this project, and any delay is going to eat away from your proposed profit. And much of this is controlled by the bureaucracy that you have to go through. For you to get the covenants approved, you actually have to get some level of government approval on the concept of what you intend to do. The approval process, as I said, is costly and lengthy. For example, one of our developers shared with us the cost of his development submission. He's building approximately 1,000 homes in this area of lower income homes. And while these fees are approximate, these are the real values that he's experiencing. So for his submission, the parish council's fees were $10 million. For the parish council street naming and unit numbering, his fee was $1.2 million. The National Works Agency, and these, we have to remember, are fees that you actually have to pay before you actually get approval. The National Works Agency was $710,000. Recently, the Works Agency, certainly in Kingston, had released what their new fees are going to be, and they're going to be charging $150 per meter square for detailed building application, and for subdivision application, they have graduated fees that, you know, whether it's 1 or 2 lots, going right up to 1,000 lots. So, you know, you might be starting from a $5,000 to $90,000 as an initial fee, and then there are charges of each lot above a specific number, which may go from 1,000 to 600. The reference point is these real costs that are actually only going to the purchaser, because the developer has no other place but to recover it from the purchaser. So I'll speak certainly towards these government fees, but these are an examples. The National Environment and Planning Agency, their fee was $340,000. The real estate board fee was $6,168,000. And the real estate board release of covenant, which is also a requirement on the conclusion of the sale, was a little over $2 million. So additional to that, you will also have fees from the National Water Commission. They have a impact assessment fee, which basically is implying that you now have to contribute to their development costs. And I'm not quite sure how they determine that. No one actually knows. So this developer, his fee was $20 million. Additional fees to the NWC would be sterilization and an ultimate connection fee. To divert a little again off the script, in Kingston, and I'm sure will happen in Montego Bay, we are very fond of gated communities. And in gated communities, we like to create an enclosure for security, for comfort, and creating, I guess, the environment we would like. And the NWC has now decided that they are not going beyond the wall. So they provide their meter on the outside, and you must decide how you are going to divide that water on the inside. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that they're still charging you the rate as if you were a single-family home. And in that single-family home, if you actually had a problem on the road, they have a responsibility to come and repair. And presently, in a gated community, if you have a problem behind the gate, they have no responsibility. So we're still hustling back and forth regard, because I don't think it's a perfect solution. I think, again, the National Water Commission should be responsible to providing the water, carrying out the infrastructure, and take the developer out of that process, which they can then guarantee who is connected to their line, because much of their fare is they're not clear who is tapping into their line. So I give an example of that. The Jamaica Public Service is also an independent body where they themselves determine the cost. So the developer has to be working with these monopolies. We have no way of going around. They determine what the values are, and we have to pass that cost on again to the customer. There are street light fees. There's garbage collection fees. There is sometimes, and what we find is that within the various parish councils, the parish councils themselves appear to also come up with their determinations. So some I've heard, haven't experienced it, but I've heard of a maintenance fee. So they determine that they would like to collect a maintenance fee for the next 5 years for that development. And you know, the developers have to budget what their costs are, so they again know what their product needs to be sold for. So of course, if you can't pinpoint those values, that creates a crisis. Again, we do feel that the government needs to play a role in this regard. So Deborah spoke obviously of the benefits of the reduction in the transfer tax, which is an excellent. We did approach the government in that regard as to whether we contributed to that turn. We're very happy for the benefit of all. So the government policy of allowing these various agencies to generate their own processing fee, which we find vary from parish to parish, as I said, have simply added additional costs to the development process, while we have not seen any significant improvement in the processing response time. Recently, my own experience is that it took over 12 months to obtain a building approval for a building that was already built. We were simply converting the existing building from resort to residential development. And during that 12 months, I didn't have to provide any additional information. It just took 12 months. So with approval in hand, when you get it, you can now come to the implementation stage. The construction sector allows for quite a bit of employment in the low skilled labor resource, which is good, but what that carries is a burden for the developer, the contractor, in the sense that you are dealing with individuals that sometimes are more problems than solutions, and they affect the quality of the work that you have to produce. So typically, when we move on to these particular sites, you get a host of possible workforce. Some you are approached by varying persons that you should employ, and of course, some of that does take place. But they have their own, issues. They bring theft and violence, and the varying factions fight over the opportunity that the project may provide to the area. So once the units have been completed, the developers' final hurdle is keeping the units safe and intact until the purchaser's financial institution has completed the payment process, which, as you know, is not done until the title has been transferred to the owner. This process at times can take up to 120 days. I know that we in our process have tried to push back, but of course when the lending agency is the lending agency, they will dictate. And this is a risk. This is a risk that the developer has to take, because it's quite common that the guy who installed the door comes back for it a little later and takes the door. And I'm saying you don't actually build in 2 doors in your cost. So that is really. So in summary, the challenge for building for the lower income, because the question may be, why are not more developers building? It's trying to understand the various challenges that they are experiencing in the lower income bracket that they may not be experiencing when they are challenging for an upper income market, which of course may have a bit more margin as well that can absorb, because the price point is not capped. All right. So I would say cheap, Deborah, accessible land, preferably flat, that can accommodate the construction system. Lentworth spoke about that with the repetition that is required. Sometimes you need heavy equipment to reduce the cost of the construction, and that type of construction requires, unfortunately, relatively flat land. We need to reduce the lengthy approval process. So while there are some improvements, I would hate to say that after 50 years we haven't really seen some. So while there are some improvements, we do feel that there is much more that can be done. There is a high security cost. And of course, that may not go away immediately, but it's a reality. And then, of course, the skilled workforce tend to move obviously towards where the price point for their services are better elsewhere. They themselves don't want to come into a contentious location because the fellas in that particular area may be seeking to control all works that are in that area. And the better person goes on to a project that doesn't provide them with that sort of problem. Access to the infrastructure, we indicated, obviously are a requirement, and the less that developer has to provide, obviously the better for the customer and the developer. Purchasing in this market has, purchases in this market has limited funds. Therefore, they require most of their funding from the financial institutions, and because of their income bracket, they will fall into certain limitations. So that limitation, as I said to you, is at the end of the day actually somewhat the limitation of the developer. They simply don't have adequate funding to be able to enter into some of these agreements, so it does cap the price. Accessing fund for low income market is therefore sets the likely return for the developer in the market and restricts what can actually be done, because it limits their ability. The bureaucratic costs that are difficult to budget, those need to be put under some level of control. And that's where we ask, in summary, the government to carry out a more holistic review of all the fees, the fee structures that presently prohibit the agencies, and they should prohibit the agencies from collecting 100% of the fees upfront, which is obviously presently the case. We ask them, that's the government, we ask them to consider accepting 50% on submission and the balance on the approval. We believe that a concept like that will result in stimulating more a performance-driven process, rather than presently what exists. Once you pay up front, there is no incentive to fast-track the process. So even though I may somewhat present a fair amount of doom and gloom, there obviously are positives. We're in this industry because we enjoy what we do, and there is benefits. I did bring some of our projects, a few.
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
1, 2, 1, 2. Yo. Yeah, yeah. Talk fast. Yeah, something there. I saw him to bring up some microphone. Need some help. Go block C. Go block C. Yeah. No, I just forget to speak. I am 1, 2. Check 1, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. One, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check. Mic check 1, 2.
1, 2, 2. Check 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 2, 3. The next one over to first. 1, 2. No money. All right. 1, 2, 2, 3. 2, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
No. Yeah. But I remember as you were mentioning somebody that got upstairs.
One, two, one. 1. Yeah.
This is podium.
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Too low. Oh, understood. 1, 2.
That sound? Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who are on the outside, we're going to ask you to make your way back into the room. We are about to commence our fireside chat, and we want to make sure that you are here to hear what we're saying. And just to remind you that immediately after the fireside chat, we'll be giving you an opportunity to ask your questions. So we're going to ask you to make note of your questions and so on, and you will get an opportunity to ask those questions right after the chat. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes to gather in the room. We want to commence at 11:45. It's now 11:42, so you only have 3 minutes to get back into the room so we can commence our last session for the morning. They're not hearing me, okay. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to again just encourage those who are on the outside to make your way in. We're about to begin our final session for the morning, our fireside chat, where we'll be looking at the opportunities and the solution. And we have our Mr. Gabriel Heron, who is Vice President of Marketing at JAMPRO. He's going to be the moderator for that session. But just before I invite Gabriel to come up and to introduce the members of the panel, I just want to really thank Michael for his presentation. And I think we really should give him a round of applause. He did a very good job job in explaining why more developers are not taking up the opportunity to build these low to mid-income housing. It is not entirely their fault. There are some attendant issues that has to be dealt with to make it more feasible for developers to get involved in that space. So Michael, we really want to thank you for sharing with us this morning. We really, really appreciate the presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite Gabriel to come up, and he's going to introduce the members of his panel, and then we're going to have a chat about the opportunities and the solution. During this session, or just after this session, we will have an opportunity for questions and answers. And then finally, JN would want to make a 5 or 10 minutes presentation. And then we break for lunch where you can eat and network with each other. Fair enough? Put your hands together as we welcome Gabriel. I'm not sure if we are currently streaming, but I also want to welcome back those people who are on social media.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Still morning? Oh yes, it is still morning. Oh, wonderful. All right, as Conrad mentioned, my name is Gabriel Heron. Before this event, I used to always wonder why and how so many of my friends are getting into real estate. I kept hearing one person leaving corporate that gone into real estate, and I was wondering why. After seeing the presentations this morning, there's no doubt in my mind as to the reasons why they got involved. And even preparing for this today, I'm realizing how many opportunities there are in the space. And from where I sit within JAMPRO, and I look at it from a macroeconomic perspective on how Jamaica is actually thriving now. 16 consecutive quarters of growth. GDP reduction by over 30%. We're now at 96% GDP, coming from a high of 140% in 2013. So we're looking at a lot of achievements over the last 6-7 years. And what does all of this mean as well? There's a lot more liquidity in the market as well. Interest rates, mortgage rates are down. I was just having a discussion earlier with Deborah, and we looked at in the early 2000s, interest rates were as high as 30%. The idea of trying to buy a house with a mortgage rate of 30%, 2006, 2007, we're looking at rates of 25, 20%. Now, thinking about that now, that almost seems impossible. But it says to us that the opportunity is now, the demand is there, the opportunities are there. How are we going to leverage that now? As a country and as individuals within the ecosystem that we have at our disposal to get the most out of it. So I won't talk too much in terms of my introduction, but I have a very distinguished panel that I'm eager to speak to and to bring light to some of the opportunities that we have to speak to. First of all, I'd like to call up Mr. Donovan Evans from NHT, and I'll be pulling on Donovan's knowledge from an NHT perspective, because of course, outside of the banks and the commercial institutions, NHT plays a critical role in this space. Secondly, Mr. Mark Card-Jarrett, Managing Director for Barnet Limited. Mr. Jarrett. and Mr. Earl Samuels from the Chief Development Financing Officer from JN. And full disclosure, I used to work at JN, so there is some bias on my part as an institution, right? Pleasure. So have a seat, gentlemen. Have a seat. Where do you want? I'll sit here. Okay. And then finally, the rose amongst the thorns, right? Angela Witter. Please join us, Angela, from the Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce, the director. 1, 2. Okay. And she's a developer as well. Is that 4 mic? All right, let me see if I can. I can't use that one. I don't think it's 1, 2. All right, gentle folks. I want to try and keep this discussion as light-spirited and as open as possible. To start off, I have a very basic question for all the panelists. I specifically drafted it because I thought it was important to give each of you a chance to address. Right? So there is a demand for low middle income housing in Western Jamaica. We see the expansion of the tourism industry over the last couple of years. There have been 4 major hotels being built. We see the expansion of the BPO industry, particularly in Western Jamaica as well. So we know that persons are here, jobs are here, money is being made. Where are the housing solutions? There's a significant gap in providing the houses. Everybody here spoke about this earlier today. But there are challenges. Michael mentioned the challenges. Lenworth mentioned the challenges as well, right? However, so can you highlight from your own perspective, right, any of the challenges specifically and suggest a solution to overcome them? Angela, I'll start with you as the lady.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. The challenges that I see as a developer and as someone who is looking for housing solutions in Montego Bay as well, is that the price point at which the majority can afford is not there. That's one of the challenge. The banking regulations and the requirements. A number of persons, even for the newbies, they do not have the collateral that's required. As a developer, from that standpoint, the regulatory requirements, as was expressed earlier, they pose a severe challenge. I mean, your approval process takes forever, and the hurdles you have to go over is like you have to buy into people to be able to get your developments approved. So these are just some of the challenges that I see that needs to be addressed.
And how do you think we can approach it? Because I'm going to ask Mr. Kai Jarrett, as a developer, how do you see the opportunities in terms of low-income housing? If based on an example for West Village and oversubscription, significant oversubscription, why are we not having more of those type of developments? Is it that it is very difficult from a price point to offer those developments in terms of the margins and the profits that we gain from it?
Well, the issues is from both angles, right? As a developer, I mean, the costs that were mentioned, you see they're very high. So for you to really create a housing solution for $9 million, I mean, it's a stretch.
Right.
And for me, in the area that I develop, which is Ironshore, the land costs in those areas are very high. So for you to put infrastructure development or infrastructure in these developments, just to start, it's a high cost. And the banking fees, again, those are high. The regulatory fees, those are high. So your start off point I think is one of the main hindrances that is causing developments not to move forward.
So what I'm hearing are, and it's a good segue for Mr. Samuels, that the banking fees are high. So I don't know if you want to jump on and address that.
Good morning. It's always still morning. Before I address the banking fees, the topic for today is housing demand for low and middle income homeowners. However, I dare say that there is absolutely no developer in Jamaica at this time, outside of the National Housing Trust, who is providing housing solution for low-income earners. Absolutely no one, and I stand challenged to that. We must define what we call low income. And I dare say anyone earning less than $1 million per annum, and I think that is stretching it. So when we're looking at the market, we need to look at affordability. And my good friend from the Master Builders Association stole some of my thunder. I think he did an excellent presentation. Low-income housing cannot be delivered or built by any developer without a high degree of subsidy from the government. When you look at the cost of infrastructure, the cost of land, and we talk about, which I share, that there's a high demand for land, but you can't look at land arbitrarily. Is land available in the area where you're having economic activities taking place so that you can provide housing around those areas? It is an accepted norm that someone should not have to commute over an excessive mileage in order to get to work for you to benefit from productivity. So you need to provide affordable housing in areas where jobs are created, where investment taking place. And so for this to be done in a structured way, what we require is the government to play a greater role in terms of zoning. And in zoning, you can have planned and orderly development. And so you can also plan housing to house the workers. And this can only for the low-income workers. If you look in the majority of the employees in the hotel sector across the region, I don't think they're earning $60,000 per month. $60,000 per month, and if you look at a debt service ratio, and by debt service ratio I mean the percentage of your salary that should go towards servicing a mortgage. If you look at, say, a debt service ratio of 50%, and you're earning, and very few financial institutions outside of the National Housing Trust, I think could use a debt service ratio of 50%. The convention is a third of your income, which is 33%. At JN, we'll go up to 42%, I think. Am I correct, Peter? We'll go up to 50%. But if you look at an income of $60,000 per month, with a debt service ratio of 30,000, that is, out of that 60,000 per month, 30,000 will have to go towards servicing a mortgage. I did some rough calculation. A house costing $5 million, amortized over 30 years, you require more than $30,000 per month to service a mortgage. So if that's the income we talk, if that's the category called as low income, there's no one providing for the low income. That can only be done with a high degree of subsidy, and that subsidy has to come from the government. We can't expect, unless Mark is very charitable and would like to, or Angela, or any other developer in here, would like to provide that type of subsidy. So I think this discussion, we should leave here with the impression that, look, there is a high demand for housing in the low and middle income market without defining what we're talking about.
So what I'm hearing is there is a demand, but from a business perspective, the reality of offering those housing solutions is not very realistic. It's not very attractive. So there is some requirement or a need for the government to get involved in some way to bridge that.
Absolutely, because developers are in the business of making money. Even if they're not profit maximizers, they still have to cover their basic cost and make a little return to remain in business. And they can't do that by providing low-income housing.
So, Sir Kajar, I think this is a good point for you to. You can use all the mics, you know. Are you fine? Okay. To jump in from your perspective.
Thank you, sir. Morning, everybody. I think first of all, to get low-income housing, because there's a significant difference between low and middle-income housing. Middle-income housing is Bogue Village, Montego West, Rhine Park, all of those areas, right? The problem for them is the lack of land available. What we have to look at low income is either we build communities outside of the town on a transport network. One of the proposals that Mr. Deere and I have had for over 20 years is to go up the Queen of Spain's Valley with a development road that goes from Montego Bay all the way through Adelphi, Wakefield, Deeside, and out at the Martha Bray grade-separated intersection. And you get about 20,000 to 30,000 homes in there. It has connectors across at Barrett Town, you have Paisley, you have Saltmarsh, right? How are you going to pay for that development road? Well, you put axle and weight restrictions on the Elegant Corridor and drive all of that traffic onto that limited access toll road. And you build in there a low-income community. Not individual homes, but row houses, like they do it everywhere else in the world, where you don't have room to expand, because if you want to move up, you move out. So you got to have affordable land and on good transport networks. And in the Queen of Spain's Valley, you have the Bogue to Duncan's power line, which is a high tension line. You have the Queen of Spain's Artesian Basin, which used to supply Montego Bay before the Great River Water Pipeline. And you build a highway through there for a development road and also an access highway. And you put in a proper mass transit system and get them into town. If you're doing low income within the city, you got to go vertical. You got to go to apartments, not townhouses, but apartments, right? And the money has to be made affordable. The other thing we can do to reduce the price is to say, okay, if you can deliver a low income house at a certain dollar threshold, well, then the government writes off the GCT on all of the building materials, and that's 16.5% right there. The other thing is that NWC and JPS must pay the developer the cost to put in their infrastructure and network, because those items are cash flow items for those companies. Why should we and the developer and the purchaser provide JPS and the NWC with the capital to create cash flow for themselves? That is totally unfair. The other thing is, of course, and I think Michael said it very well, was all the fees and rates and everything that come in, and all of those rates and fees are up front. So where is the developer going to get it? Is he going to have to borrow that money and then charge the interest on? Or you say, okay, you know what, the development fees and everything, 25% down. 25% on granting of approval, and the remainder over the life of the project on the transfer of each unit. And therefore you cash flow those things on, and you can reduce a lot of those fees too, because they're getting fat off the thing. And currently, as Michael said, when you pay it up front, there is no incentive for those agencies to deliver your approvals on a timely basis, right? The other issue is that we can look at is that when the developer wants to transfer the roads in the development, you have to give the parish council, I think, 3 years of maintenance fees up front. How do you know what that is going to be when the development is gone? Are you going to have to cut that off out of your profit, or are you going to bulk your profit up to just try and absorb and preempt what those charges might be? And I think we've also got to look at reviewing the very building standards themselves. Maybe we can compromise a little bit on what you deliver as a low-income home. You know, you leave a lot of the internal build-out for the occupant, so that they can cash flow in some of their internal improvements as well, right? So that you can actually deliver the house itself, or the residential unit, whether it's an apartment or a row house like what you call a council house in England, right? But let them do a lot of the interior finishing, so the actual handover price is reduced. And once you get that down, you write off your GCT and all of your other issues to the purchaser.
That very, very insightful. Thank you very much for that. That's a lot to digest and a lot of solutions that I'm hearing. I know that I can't speak for the government per se, but the rationale behind the argument sounds very sound. And it's just for us now as stakeholders to try and work together to address those limitations that we have in the ecosystem. Donovan, as a colleague within the government, I think now is a good time for you to chime in.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, everyone. Our NHG, our main focus is as a financier, unlike the others. Our mandate is to increase the housing stock, to increase and enhance the housing stock. And we do that by way of providing financing to our contributors to build, to purchase, and to upgrade the housing stock. Now, we are very mindful of the great demand out there for houses, and more so for low income. Through our demand survey, we are aware of that, and most recently, we have developed a joint venture. We have a joint venture that we advertise over 1,500 solutions, and we got over 15,000 applications, right? 15. So for every one unit, there are 10 persons who would want one of those units. So and so we recognize the challenges there. Our loan limit is just 6.5, and of course, that is not sufficient to buy a unit. But in terms of solutions, we are approaching it from two fronts. One in which we try to assist our contributors as much as possible, and the other is to assist developers to produce low-income homes. In respect of our contributors, we offer a range of services. There is what we call the JFM. Mr. Summers is familiar with that, joint finance mortgage, that is. So it means that if you are buying a property and there is a shortfall, you can always go to JN, process our amount along with the shortfall. We are also offering mortgages at 0% for persons who are earning 15,000 or less. It's 0% interest that we charge.
I'm sure is everybody aware of this offering at 0%?
Pardon? No. Once you earn 15,000 or less per week, the interest is 0%. And in addition to that, you can get a home grant for up to 2.5 million.
So Donovan, so to go back to what Mr. Samuel was mentioning earlier, in terms of the $60,000 salary bracket and the interest rate being offered, so there is an opportunity in some respects to fill that gap.
And that is the point I'm making. Only with deep or steep subsidy can that be afforded. So what NHG is doing is giving a subsidy, 0% interest rate. That's a subsidy. All they're doing is amortizing the principal. But that is still not solving the problem. Because...
But in some respects, it's providing housing solutions for some of these individuals.
Nobody's billing them.
But nobody's billing them, that's the problem.
Who's going to build those units? Those units can only be built by NHT, again with subsidy. I made an important recommendation. When you look at the structure of cost, you look at how much is paid to the regulatory agencies, the local authorities, how much you pay for GCT, and so on. There's a significant amount which is built in. And plus, the time it takes for you to get the approval, which is also cost, time is money. So if we improve the system, in addition to what NHT is doing, then we start to work towards a solution.
That's a mark itching.
Yeah, let me just add too, is that one thing that I believe can be done is that we can mobilize the NHT employer contributions, because those are not lent to the contributors. That goes strictly to reserves, and that's in the region between 10 and 12 billion dollars a year. That just goes to reserves, and from time to time, the government goes in and dips in those funds like they have over time. As an employer who contributes to the NHT, I would want to see those funds used to promote low-income housing, right?
I want to give, that's a very good point, Mark. I want to give Donovan a chance.
$12 billion.
Yes.
They're not using $12 billion a year. And the 12 billion could go towards subsidizing the NWC infrastructure, the JPS infrastructure, and could go towards, even writing off some of the transfer tax, or because you're delivering the unit at a lower cost, you actually subsidize the application fees and all of that. With a little bit of thought, ingenuity, and creativity, and thinking outside of the box, we can solve this problem,
Right.
And with that level of, I think it's over $50 billion in reserves right now in the NHT, that could go towards creating a new community.
Yeah, well,
and the community is what we need, because we need tens of thousands of homes for the North Coast. And I'm talking about a development that is going to basically provide housing for people from Ocho Rios to Negril.
So from what I understand, in NHT, and this is the figure I found there, has allocated $40 billion for construction over 2019-2020. I don't know if this figure is correct, but from our research, this is what I'm seeing.
What's the figure?
40 billion US.
Before Donovan gets into this.
So I do want to give him a chance.
Yeah, before he gets into the specific, Mark, and maybe I shouldn't be defending this point.
Please do.
But having in-depth knowledge of how the housing trust operates, that's not true about the employer's contribution not being used for development. As a matter of fact, every year, if you look back maybe over the past 25, 30 years, the amount that NHT spends on new development and mortgages is more than twice what they collect for both employers and employee contribution on an annual basis. That is not to say the NHT funding could not be more structured in how it is utilized. But I don't want us to leave here with that notion.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel, former managing director, so you're still batting for us. And thank you. No, I can tell you, that 3% employer contribution, it is used to subsidize housing development. If you look at what we are doing now at the estuary at Friendship, we are building 1,500 units, all right? It's about 380 square foot. And the cost is only 4.47 million. Nowhere else in this country you can find that at that price. You can't.
This is oversubscribed, of course.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's oversubscribed. It is.
Volume is what we need to look at. And we need to start building communities, right? Because these one-off developments are expensive on infrastructure. Because you know how for those 1,500 units, I saw it, that they had to lay a water main all the way back to the Tucker pumping station, right? But it has to be done on the economies of scale. Or you go vertical where the existing infrastructure is to minimize the cost per unit. And I'm really happy to hear about what NHT is doing, but I believe it could be done a little bit more efficiently.
And you also need zoning. You don't have a development taking place over here, one over there, one over there. You have to go and put in new sewer main, you have to go put in new potable water mains and so on. If the thing was properly planned and structured, the economies of scale from the basic infrastructure that is laid could be great.
and the utility companies could plan their infrastructure, their trunk mains and their distribution systems and all of that.
So what I'm hearing, and
just one second.
I want to give.
But I just want to make one point. What is not known is that these infrastructure which are put in by the private developers and also by NHT, they're handed over to the utility companies free of cost.
Along with the roads.
No, not free of cost, you know. We have to pay maintenance, advance maintenance.
But the utility companies get the cash flow. You're basically creating customers by building the units and then putting another capital investment for the utility collection and delivery system, handing it over to those utility companies for free of charge, and they're getting cash flow, right? So the purchaser has to come up with all the money up front. So you're building the system to give them cash, and you're creating customers at an expense to yourself for them to get something free of charge.
Right.
And the whole concept is wrong.
So what I'm hearing, and before I pass the gentleman, I want to give Angela a chance to speak. So what I'm hearing is that we need to focus on volume and building larger communities to drive down the individual cost. And also, how do we engage the utility companies to get involved in that process as well? Angela, over to you.
As it relates to Montego Bay, right? I see everybody's batting for the lower income bracket, but there is a significant demand for the middle income bracket, right? And I mean, that is like within the 9 million to the 20 million bracket. And even to produce those units is costly. And I mean, looking at Montego Bay and how it's developed right now, there is not much land space left for development, right? So as Mark said, we have to look outside of the town center and see how, you know, developers can deal with putting in infrastructure and units in those areas to facilitate the demand in the middle income and low income. Now, what would need to happen, as is said as well, is that the government would have to really come in and play a major role. The parish councils would have to play a major role as well. And I think that maybe NHT also needs to do like a survey to look at the land bank in the area to see where the areas are and to characterize the building that is going on, because right now you just have like, I mean, a ad hoc development that is taking place and the squatters. I mean, what's happening right now is that even the squatter developments have become projects. Because, I mean, some of the persons who are employed are living in squatter settlements.
So hold on, let me clarify. You said the squatter developments are becoming projects.
Yes,
that's a heavy statement.
They are projects in and of themselves because workers find themselves having to be living in them, right? And they are not cheap. You're paying like $15,000, $30,000 a month to live in a squatter settlement, and they are unplanned and undeveloped.
Yeah, that is a major concern. I'll move over to Mr. Summers. Earl, GN has a long history of as a building society and probably one of the more aggressive financial companies out there now in the mortgage space. But as we're realizing, a lot of the challenges as it relates to low middle income housing is really with the developers in terms of the associated costs. Is there any way or any avenues that GN is providing some opportunity? I can't speak to it from your perspective, so I want to give you the opportunity to speak to it.
GN being the longest serving and the oldest mortgage provider in the country, we are always looking at creative ways to increase home ownership and affordability. So we, up until about 2 years ago, we were primarily in the mortgage market, that is providing long-term financing for the purchases of the units developed by the developers here, or people wanting to purchase units on the open market. And so what we try to do in order to assist those mortgagors is we constantly review our mortgage rates and also our processing the process to make it as streamlined and as less troublesome for the prospective purchasers. And we also look at constantly reviewing our interest rate based on cost of funds and so on. And we do not interest rate maximize, right? So we try to go as low as possible. Presently, we lend from anywhere 7.5%, and special cases we can even look below that, but 7.5% to 8% is where we are on the mortgage side. On the development financing side, which we are heavily into now, and I'm heading that unit, interest rate pretty low, and we work along with the developers not only to provide development financing, we help them to structure the projects, and we also help them to market the projects. JN, globally, we have over 800,000 members. And so on a weekly basis, we, if you're on the developers program, we expose your project to this wide market, almost 800,000. So people locally and abroad. So we help you with the marketing. And we also help you with structuring the project. Presently in this area, we have several large developments taking place. There is one across from the Grand Palladium, over 435 units, 2 and 3 bedroom units. We have some out higher end out by Reading. We just finished one on the Sunset Strip called Chatham Palms and so on. So we are open to providing financing not only for those who are doing lower income development. We are at all end of the market.
This is a specific category that you're focusing on.
Well, we are open, but we would like to encourage the lower income end of the market to come to us, because a lot of people think that you can only get financing for low income by going to the NHT.
And I'd like to commend Jane for that.
But we are also open to, because we think by increasing home ownership, we help to bring a greater level of social stability to the country.
Absolutely.
Home ownership makes you feel better about yourself, and it also helps to cut down on especially in this section of the island, the level of antisocial behavior which we see in society. So NHT is also, not NHT, JN.
Different hat.
I've thrown that hat away a long time.
So before I move on to Mark.
But JN is really out there to work along with both the developers and the purchasers to assist with home ownership.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Before I move on to Mark, as I mentioned, what I'm also encouraged with now is that the number of financial institutions, I know that Jen is a sponsor here today, but the engagement and the number of financial institutions in this space now makes it so much more competitive that these institutions are almost forced, I would say, to be a lot more competitive. And I think we have to encourage that environment.
That's a good thing.
Be grateful for that environment. Mark.
The other thing that just to commend JN too, is they came out with 110% loan the other day, which takes a lot of pressure off the homeowners who don't have a lot of savings and capital. And I just really, take my. The other thing you see, what's so important about home ownership, apart from the fact that it gives people dignity, it gives them collateral that they can leverage for education and small business. It creates legal utility connections where the JPS and also the non-revenue services are minimized. It gets the homeowner into the tax net, paying property taxes and other things. And as we increase our tax base, now the more people paying taxes, the more services you can now give it to the people at the bottom, and so the greater the safety net. And it brings a level of confidence and reassurance and civility into the society. And so, you know, one of the fastest ways to bring law, order, and compliance is to create housing, right? And you give the people the dignity that they deserve. What we've done with the Montego Bay South Plan, which was a 1,500-acre, 16-phase development, is that, you know, we allocated about, 230 and another, nearly 500 acres to housing, middle-income housing. Bourg Village was 1,620 units. But you go in there, and each almost, I'd say at least a third, if not 2/3, of the units that have been built have between 4 to 6 light meters on their pole, right? So you now have a development that was designed for 2, maybe 3 bathrooms per lot, per house, now has 6. You wonder why the water pressure drops off and the sewer systems are overloaded, why the roads are being destroyed, because 3 times the amount of cars are running over it, dripping oil and everything else. We need the local authority and the building and roads department particularly to go out there and police these developments. If you have a single family unit, how can you have 6 light meters on the socket? How can JPS be allowed to provide electricity and those 6 meters to that thing when it is zoned as single family? So the very utility companies are contributing to the lawlessness.
In hindsight, we should have probably invited somebody from a utility company. And that is something that we'll probably try and address in the next business forum. So thank you very much for that point.
So, and the same thing is now happening at Montego West, and that's 1,100 homes. So you're looking between Bourg Village and Montego West, you're looking at 27, call it 2,800 units, right? But you can be guaranteed that there are 10,000 people living in there. Where are the roads to support that, right? Where is that road that what we had designed within the Montego Bay South Plan, the Temple Galleries Road, should have been a 4-lane connector between Granville and the Bourg Road. But instead, it's been gated at either ends. I mean, how can this be allowed to happen?
So there are some system issues that we clearly, this is Jamaica, you know how it is.
No, I don't accept that.
No, what I'm saying
that is the problem.
We need to change it. We need to change it. So we need to move away from that this is Jamaica approach. We need to start realizing that there are problems within the system and address them as quickly and as swiftly as possible, right? And I'm really glad that what we're doing in hearing the demand and in hearing the opportunity and before coming here today is like, why are we not closing this gap? I'm
Realistically,
really
let me just add one thing.
We're able to unearth all of these challenges that the developers are having and what the homeowners will face in actually bringing these projects to fruition, because it's not necessarily public knowledge for everybody to know that the developers have these issues to deliver these projects. So it's very important for us to highlight it first and bring it to the public for.
But if you look at Bourg Village and Montego West, or even Rhine Park, instead of those being single-family houses, if they were row houses, you would have got an additional unit to every 2 lots, because it would have you'd have them in these arcs, like you see them in Bath and Leicester and all over the world, where you have row houses, you have semi-detached units, where you share a common wall. You could up your density by over 1/3 for the same cost of the land, right? Yeah. And so therefore your land costs would go down, your building costs would go down, right? Because you have share wall, and you'd actually then be able to have bigger parks within the development to service it, so you keep the green areas that are so necessary for kind of family and community interaction.
All right, Angela, coming back to you now. I have to be defending to give you your space, you know, right? Thank you very much.
What Mark said really is profound.
It is, it definitely
is important, because, I mean, we have the same challenges in a development like Ironshore, where you have single-family houses being transformed into multi-family living. So you'll find single-family three-bedroom house being transformed into 3 apartments. I mean, even with from construction phases, now persons are, like giving or submitting plans for like a 4 bedrooms. On the face of it, you see like a games room coming, a garage. At the end of the completion of the development or the housing project, it's been transformed to a 1-bedroom apartment. So these are some of the challenges that you face, and as a developer, you did not provide for that additional family. So as Mark said, it really does impact development.
So Donovan, I'm going to go back over to you in a bit, but I just want to kind of encapsulate the narrative in that. All right, so again, pulling back, the demand is huge, massive, right? The challenges they're mirror challenges as it relates to, they're not insurmountable as it relates to the utility issues, as it relates to the fees, as it relates to the actual occupancy and how the occupancy is utilized by the tenants, so to speak. So they're transforming the units from what's supposed to be to meet the demand, right? So there are all these challenges there, and we as stakeholders, it is important, and this is, we all face the rain at the end of the day when we stand out in the open. So we as stakeholders have to come together in some respects and try and find a solution. And Donovan, I'll leave that for you to enter the conversation.
Well, it's in terms of solutions. Yes, Jane is offering 110% financing. Did mention that our main focus is on financing, but we do developments. In terms of the schemes, we offer 100% financing for schemes. And in addition to that, there's no deposit required. I want to look also at what we are doing for the developers, because from what we are offering to the developers, they are able to reduce the cost of housing. And we talk about joint venture, because at the S3, that's what we are doing now, and that's why we are able to get the price at 4.47.
Remind me of the volume at S3?
1,500.
1,500. Okay.
Yeah, 1,500 at the S3. And we do what you call interim finance also. So a developer wanting to do a development, once they can, once the price point is reasonable to us, we can finance that development.
I would like to say something. The challenge that we have in Montego Bay now, I mean, the S3 is 1,500 units. But in Montego Bay, and I'm sure in Ocho Rios and in Kingston, that is not meeting the demand. So it creates a significant negative impact on the housing solutions that's in the area. We are not providing enough homes for the persons who want homes to live. And this is the challenge. And I mean, as much as NHT is providing some level of financing, developers are avoiding them because the process to implement a project, to get it on board, to come in at a price point is very onerous. And so nobody is taking it up. And we have to find a medium. Where is it that we are going to be able to partner with NHT, partner with all the banks that are offering the funds to the developers to build the solutions that's required before the city just grows out of control.
The other issue too is to take on from where Angela said there, is in downtown Montego Bay. You remember when they did that relocation 2000 exercise from all of the railway lands? And they built the houses out here in Providence? That was a flawed development from the beginning, because that down at the railway is where the people made their money. So you're taking them away and now giving them a transport cost. But that land was left idle for, it's now 2019, and that was relocation 2000. Why did the government not go look for some developers and build some high rises right there and create a 5,000 unit development? right? Why not that? Well, let's get creative about it. And, if you want to be skeptical, are we at this position in Jamaica because a squatter is accountable to a politician, but a politician is accountable to a homeowner? Are we here by design or by default?
Exactly.
Right? And we have to become more proactive. We have to take and look at the welfare of our citizens above everything else.
Correct,
and
absolutely.
there are opportunities that have been squandered. Relocation 2000, I was so excited about that, to think that the whole of that area was going to be redeveloped with high-rise housing and maybe some shopping and some a cultural center, that you could actually turn it into almost into an attraction, right? Which every development should be, in order to give the people who are buying into it value, right? But we just squander these assets, and there is sewage, there is water, and there is electricity on that location, but we have done nothing with it.
So Mark, who is the problem? What's caused the problem, or what is the problem that you're facing?
There is a disconnect between government and private sector, I believe. I don't think the public sector or the government really has a proper inventory of its lands, and the private sector does not know how to go and approach government to get access to those lands and to put a proper PPP together where you can deliver a product at market value.
So we have a leadership problem.
There's a leadership, and there is a disconnect.
So what I'm hearing is that there needs to be a lot more engagement, a lot more interworking.
You almost need an agency that their sole job is to go and work out PPPs.
Correct.
Right? You have an inventory that the government has of its lands, and you have the developers, you have the financing, and you decide, okay, what is our price point? This area at Relocation 2000 Railway is going to be a mixed residential commercial development. Maybe the first 2 floors of the building are going to be commercial, and the 7 above it are going to be residential. So you actually create a lifestyle center that is not abandoned in the middle of the night.
That's a global model where you have a social community where,
But a lot of private sector look at it and say, oh, well, we could never do it because the application fees and all of the development fees and the cost of infrastructure. And, NWC is going to charge me $20 million just to connect to the water system. And there are all of these disincentives that drive up the cost of the development and take away that opportunity of home ownership from the Jamaican that most desperately needs it and deserves it.
Sir Samuels, thank you.
In Brazil, they have the favelas, which is where there were once slum settlements. And what the government has done, they moved in, they create formal housing, not high-end housing. But in order for these to become sustainable, they have to look at the income side. So what they do is just a term used. They call it the Chinaman approach, where they have residential accommodation above, and they have commercial activities downstairs. So they can generate the income and the bill based on the family size. So if it's a single person, he would get or she would get a studio unit, and as the family size grows, then you have to seed back this unit to the cooperative, and you get access to another unit. And over time, based on your economic state improves, then you can purchase a unit. So we have to start somewhere. Unless we take that approach in dealing with some of the low-income sector, we'll never be able to solve that.
I think you raise a very important point in terms of creating communities that are self-sustainable within themselves, and that generates income for the families right there. And then if we can enable that kind of environment, we are far way ahead.
And what it does too is it prevents the community, a commercial area, from going dark at night.
Your life is always in there, so it doesn't become a place for the drug pushers and the criminals and everybody else. And you're also maximizing the utilities because they're being used 24 hours a day and not just 12 hours a day during business hours, but you have a residential component to it as well.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we could go on for another half an hour. I say, Donovan, I think you want to make a final point. I don't know if you want to. I think I want to give you the opportunity to.
Well, just to say that we recognize the demand for low and middle income. And of course, we are doing all we can to address that need from the point of view of our contributors and from the point of view of developers.
And I want to say, let's also remember, ladies and gentlemen, over the last couple of years, you've seen that NHG has made strategic strides in terms of the changes in the policies. As much as we're getting challenges here, we have to give kudos to NHG, the 6.5 increase, the reduction in transfer tax. So let's not forget about the progress that's being made on that front. But that said, I thought that this session was indeed very, very insightful. I thought that we unearthed a lot of the challenges that we hear in the demand, but we need to hear what the challenges are so that we can actually develop a plan to address them. Thank you all very much for your time. And as, of course, we have a scrumptious meal set up for you behind here. Please don't go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's join us at the back. Let's join us at the back, and I'll hand over to Mr. Robinson, the statesman, as I like to call him.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, and to the panel. We really appreciate the candid way in which we had this discussion, looking at the opportunities and the solution. So if you look at your program, you will see where we have a segment there for question and answers. We have a microphone set up right there in the middle. We're going to be taking some questions from you. Perhaps we can do this until about 10 minutes to 1 o'clock, and we're going to be sticking to that time. So we have 7 minutes for question and answer. We're going to invite Nina where she is. She's there, and she's going to come up and she's going to close us out, and we go for lunch at 1, right? And we're going next door for lunch, all right? Janet?
Yes. I don't know if this microphone is...
It is on. It is? No, go again. Turn it on again. I think you turned it off. There you go.
Check. Yeah. Okay. My question is to the National Housing Trust representative. I can't remember exactly how often you can get loan as someone who has borrowed before. How long after can you go back to NHD? Because I would really like to get a loan now. But I did get one some time ago. And has that changed? I thought maybe in the beginning it was like 15 years. I can't remember. But has there been any change where that is concerned?
Thank you for that question. Yes, there is. As it is now, if you are a private sector worker, you can get a second mortgage after 15 years. If you are a public sector worker, it's after 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
So that's in place.
Right.
Among other things, you can get your solar water heater loan and so on.
Worker. What if you're a private sector operator?
Pardon?
You said private sector worker. What about self-employed persons that are not they're not employed to any private sector person? Yeah. Are you still, is that 15 years?
Yeah, 15. There's a distinction between public sector and private. So if you're self-employed,
don't worry, I was
in
playing
the
devil's advocate.
private sector.
All right, thanks.
Questions?
What I heard, thank you all very much, was very, very interesting. What really has resonated with me today is what Earl said. What is the difference between low to middle income housing? I mean, if you look at middle income housing now, you're looking at between $14 and $19 million. And you have thousands of people wanting those properties. So that means they can afford it, okay? And for a developer, you're in business to make money, okay? So to talk about low income, we need to make a distinction. You have people that are totally impoverished, have no work, and will never, be able to own a home unless the government gives them a home. I think one of the things that we need to address is to be able to raise the level of productivity, education, and the earning potential of people. So, you know, as I said, we come to these things all the time and you talk low to middle income housing. What really is the demand? Let us divide that. What is the demand? What is the government's responsibility and what is private sector's responsibility? All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I see a question. You could just come and use the microphone. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I must confess that coming here today, my only reason was because I believe I was going to get a house free. But listening to the presenters, I realized that it's not so. But I can tell you, I am very satisfied with what I am hearing because there's a solution. And you're telling me now that you're not going to give me a fish, but you actually teach me how to fish. My concern, though, is that I hear all the problem. I hear what is it that we need to do to fix this problem that is a solution. But how? How do we deal with it from here? Bureaucracy, red tape, as Mr. Jarrett pointed to, the high fees and stuff like that. We keep talking about them. How do we approach it from here on?
I think one of the things we have to do is, government does not listen to the lone voice in the wilderness. And what we have to do is come together. And I think one of the best vehicles to do that is the Jamaica Developers Association and our local chambers of commerce. And we go and lobby the PSOJ and create a harmony of voices and come with solutions, not just saying this is the problems, but come with solutions and also couch the solutions in such a way that the politicians can own them. Because to be honest with you, if we don't give the solutions to the government so that they can make the political mileage out of it, nothing's going to get done. We've got to surrender self. Right? And we have to couch the solutions to the government and say, boy, Minister, did you know that you thought about this? Right? And that's how we have to do it by using the economies of scale, which is GDP. And we do that through the representative associations and the PSOJ and chambers, because politicians respect numbers.
And I'll add to what Mark just mentioned now. We're on the right track, because at least we're having the conversation. And that's the first step, right? Coming out of this forum, what we're looking to do now is address in the next forum that we have some of these issues a lot more directly. So coming with the solutions, coming with what are the specific things that the different agencies and organizations need to do to implement these.
See Michael at the podium.
Sorry, thank you. This is directed to you, Donovan, of course. The zero financing market, which of course is probably where the largest volume of homeowners or prospective homeowners are. And I think a lot of times the solutions are easily achieved when we can empower our citizens, because they come up with very creative and simple and direct ways. They kind of cut straight to the chase. Certainly on our side as a developer, we have been thinking of options of how to provide almost like a do-it-yourself option that is better or more economical than the block and seal that they do go to. Because nowadays, no one wants to take on a mortgage unless it has concrete and steel associated with it, even though the traditional, timber homes were actually very good and served their purpose. The question to you is, as it relates to the zero financing, I know there's an age limit associated. Roughly, how much funds does that relate to, that you're willing to provide zero financing? And then the other question is, Does the NHT consider for that bracket that they would put in if one was to provide a sort of a do-it-yourself option? Someone that can build within the same yard of their mother, but now has a kit. And I don't want to use a kit home as a bad terminology, but a satisfactory. Is there a value that the NHT is willing to put into the mix with that zero financing?
At the 0% financing, there's a significant number of contributors. And of course, most can't afford the 6.5 because most of these persons are young persons just start working. And our loan term, you can get up to age 70. So at 6.5, yes, but just at the demand, the houses at that price is not there. So there's a great demand for houses in that price range. And so there is the joint finance mortgage, which can assist prospective young homeowner to own a home after getting the 6.5 from us. So it's a matter of going forward and to design specific programs to address this group.
Okay, I'm working on that. So you're saying your value is 6.5, but that is the maximum.
Yeah, that's the maximum they'll be able to get from us. But there's a joint finance mortgage.
Yeah, but I think
they have access to.
at that point they would be maxed out as it is, you know.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Okay.
It sounds, Michael, like you need to sit with Donovan at lunch.
Yeah, man, that's
and work that out. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we could go on, and that's the thing about these kind of forums, you know. You never seem to have enough time. And I really want to thank our panelists and our moderator, Donovan, Mark, Mr. Samuels, Angela, and Gabriel, for taking us through what I consider to be a very, 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 very thought-provoking fireside chat. Ladies and gentlemen, could you put your hands together and thank our panel and our moderator for this very interactive session. Thank you very much. You may exit the stage. Thank you. So we're going to hand over to Nina. She's going to come. And she's going to wrap up for us. But just before she gets here, I would like to extend thanks on behalf of JAMPRO to all of you who came out this morning into this afternoon to this Business Opportunity Forum. It's one of the more successful ones that we've had. And it is obvious that this topic has struck a nerve and that there is more work for us to do in terms of bringing the stakeholders together to find a solution where we can deliver houses at a price point that most can afford. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. We really want to thank the Convention Center. We want to thank, of course, those presenters earlier this morning who made presentation, certainly from the Realtors Association of Jamaica. We want to thank you, Andrew. Deborah, we want to thank you for coming and sharing with us as well. We really appreciate it. Michael, thank you very much. And Mr. Kelly, of course, you and your presentation. And during which time you showed us that the cost is real. And unless we have partnerships with government, we won't be able to get the cost below a certain price point. And we really want to thank you all for that. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Put your hands together as we welcome Nina to come and do her presentation. I wanted to thank Jamaica National, but since she hasn't spoken yet, we're going to just save that for last.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Conrad Robinson, Chairman, Western Regional JAMPRO Office, right? It's Janet Silvera, President, Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Carlton Samuels. Earl Samuels. My apologies. I know this gentleman very, very well. All right, sir. Head JN, Chief Development Finance Officer. Ms. Patel James, Head Mobile Banking, JN Bank. Ms. Deborah Cummings, Managing Director, Century 21, Mr. Andrew James, President, Realtor Association of Jamaica, Mr. Linworth Kelly, President, Master Builders Association of Jamaica, Mr. Michael Lake, President, Developers Association of Jamaica. Oh, wow. Other presenters and sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, hearty good afternoon to you. I believe, sorry, the slides, thank you. The Jamaica National Group, of which JN Bank is a member, is no ordinary private sector institution because it serves the entire nation. Steeped in 145 years of history, it's factual that our institution can be called and considered a movement that has assisted Jamaicans, whether they're living here or abroad, to have some sense of identity and, of course, confidence. Do you agree? We believe that once you can get into, and you heard the panel, own a home, your confidence, your ability to leverage financing, a number of things start to happen for you. As businessmen and women or individuals, there are solutions to assist you to achieve this process of success for home ownership, which includes a range of savings and credit products. Sorry, just checking, is there something not able to? All right. As well as to help persons to get financial empowerment, we at Jamaica National are ready to helping the Jamaicans and those who belong to Jamaica overall, whether by marriage, whatever it is, we are here ready to help you to achieve this process. This afternoon, I will highlight some of the solutions, particularly some credit solutions. I heard a lot of solutions being requested. I heard 110, I heard a number of things, right, which we offer at JN to assist in putting you, your business, and your clients on a pathway to financial success. JN is perhaps the best known for mortgages and continues to be our core product. We remain the dominant players in the private mortgage arena. This means that besides NHT, right, Donovan, besides NHT, we are the largest mortgage providers. Since last year, we have introduced several innovations to the mortgage space, starting with DYM, Design Your Mortgage. Solutions, definitely, to suit everyone's lifestyle, style, overall budget. We are here, Design Your Mortgage. Everybody can qualify. Included in these, we talk about the mortgage rates, the Mortgage Plus, graduated mortgage. We talk about persons who are, going into their first job. You just graduated. We can provide you with a solution to start to own your first home. Fixed rate mortgages, extended mortgage, a balloon payment mortgage, all of these very creative. Want to know about this a little bit more? We will entertain you right after this, throughout lunch and later on, absolutely. Right? Receive your mortgage in 30 days. Talk about another innovation. Once you have everything in place, all the documentation, we at JN Bank can deliver. Have you ever heard of we are there. On a personal side, just to add a little bit, you can also borrow against your savings at JN. Very competitive interest rates where that is concerned. At the end of the day, you have your funds and you would have achieved you would have accomplished your achievement by borrowing against your own funds. Maximum of 5 years, and come to us, we can certainly find a solution. If you want it in less, we can give it to you as well. So we have several offerings that will cover the wide space of financial solutions that you are seeking. So we talk about low interest rates, up to 90% financing, up to 60% on heavy duty equipment. So those of us who are self-employed and we have that backhoe, or we need to get that backhoe, or we need to get that truck, all of that we will help you with. Up to 7 years to repay in most instances, depending again on the assets and so forth. You see 20% off your general insurance. I'll tell you of lines of credit and unsecured facilities, we have disrupted the market again. Interest rates so competitive. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue to give back through our JN Foundation. We do literacy, financial literacy programs. We can come into your organizations free of cost and deliver solutions to your staff and to yourselves. We also go into institutions. Just as I leave here, I go to UWI today. And believe you me, the room, I believe, is going to be crowded. The youngsters are looking forward to our financial literacy talk. So this is something that JN, through the JN Foundation, we are delivering. So Jamaica National, JN Brand, JN Group, we are here in every sector possible. Ladies and gentlemen, our financial products and services are designed to assist you to achieve in every area of your lives, right? We are here to stay. With 145 years, you would know that JN is, of course, safe, secure, sound institution to work with. We look forward to having you join the JN movement and having your customers and employees become a part of our movement so that together we can achieve collective success. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And you can join us at the booth, at the back, as soon as you have had lunch, or if you would like us to join you, absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Nina. JN will certainly help you find a way. They helped us found a way today to deliver this forum. I really want to thank them for partnering with us. We also want to thank the Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce for being here, and of course the Montego Bay Convention Center for hosting us this afternoon. Ascend was our tech group. We want to thank them for supporting us in this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much. Lunch is right next door. Please do not leave without having lunch with us. And we expect that you're going to be networking and mingling with each other as you sit around those tables. Have a good rest of the afternoon, and thank you again for being here.